Television made these people permanent. Their reruns still play somewhere tonight, and the faces still look the way they looked 60 years ago, young and lit, and sure of everything. That is the trick of syndication. It freezes a person at their best week and keeps selling that week forever, long after the person has stopped being paid for it. What the reruns never show is the apartment with the heat shut off, the bank account with $200 in it, the hospital bill a stranger had to pay. Some of the most recognizable faces in American comedy spent their last years counting change, and a few of them died with less money than the average viewer watching them. These are the ones Hollywood quietly stopped calling, and it only gets darker. Number 1. Butterfly McQueen. On the night of December 22, 1995, firefighters in Augusta, Georgia, found an elderly woman lying on the sidewalk outside a burning one-bedroom cottage. She told them her clothes had caught fire while she was trying to light one of her 2 kerosene heaters. She had second- and third-degree burns across 70% of her body, and she died at Augusta Regional Medical Center about 9 hours later. The neighbors on that street knew her as Thelma. Most had no idea that the small woman who watered her plants and picked up trash at the local school had appeared in the highest-grossing film in American history. Her name was Thelma McQueen, born in Tampa in 1911, the only child of a stevedore and a domestic servant. She took the name Butterfly from a ballet sequence in a 1935 stage production and kept it for life. In 1939, she played Prissy in Gone with the Wind. She was also in The Women that same year, then Cabin in the Sky, Mildred Pierce, and Duel in the Sun. The parts were all maids, and she refused to keep taking them. "I didn't mind being funny, but I didn't like being stupid," she said. Hollywood stopped hiring her almost immediately. From 1950 to 1952, she played Oriole on the ABC comedy Beulah. Then the cast was replaced, and that ended too. For the next 2 decades, she supported herself as a dishwasher, a factory worker, a taxi dispatcher, a sales clerk at Macy's, and a paid companion. She earned a college degree in 1975 at 64 years old. She spent her last years in that cottage, heating one room with kerosene because there was nothing else. She left her body to the Medical College of Georgia. The woman whose face is in one of the most watched films ever made spent 40 years cleaning up after other people, and the fire that killed her started because she could not afford a furnace. Number 2. Jeff Conaway. The injury that shaped the last 30 years of his life happened on a stage, not a film set, during a theater production in the 1970s, and his back never healed. He was 19 when he played Danny Zuko in the original Broadway run of Grease. By 1978, he was in the film version as Kaniki, and that same year, he joined the cast of Taxi as Bobby Wheeler, an actor driving a cab between auditions. Taxi had Judd Hirsch, Danny DeVito, and Andy Kaufman in it, and it won Emmy after Emmy. Conaway did not last on it. By the end of the 3rd season, his drinking and cocaine use had made him unreliable, and the character was written out. What followed was 30 years of chronic pain treated with prescription opioids, then with more of them. He kept finding work, including 4 seasons on the series Babylon 5 in the 1990s. He also appeared on Celebrity Rehab in 2008 and again in 2010, detoxing on camera, badly, twice. In May of 2011, he was found unresponsive at his home in Encino and put into a medically induced coma. He never woke up. He died on May 27, 2011, at 60 years old. The Los Angeles County coroner attributed his death to pneumonia with sepsis, not an overdose. He was one of the most recognizable faces of 1978, and by the end, the most public thing about him was footage of him falling apart on cable. Number 3. Yvonne De Carlo. In 1962, on the set of How the West Was Won, A stunt sequence went wrong, and a load of logs came down on her husband, the stuntman Bob Morgan. He lost a leg. He was in and out of hospitals for the next several years. The medical bills landed on her, and she took the work that paid. Before that, she had been a Universal Pictures star. Salome Where She Danced in 1945 made her a name. Criss Cross in 1949 put her opposite Burt Lancaster, and in 1956, Cecil B. DeMille cast her as Sephora, the wife of Moses, in The Ten Commandments. Then, in 1964, she put on the white streak and the long black dress and became Lily Munster. The Munsters ran 2 seasons and 70 episodes on CBS, and it made her face permanent in a way none of the films had. It was also canceled in 1966, and after that, the offers were mostly low-budget horror pictures. She had one more real moment. In 1971, she stood on a Broadway stage in Follies and sang a song about a woman the business had used up and moved past, and the reviews were the best of her entire later career. Her marriage ended in 1974. She kept taking small parts into her 70s because she needed the income, and a stroke in the late 90s finally stopped her. She died on January 8, 2007, at 84, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills. That is the industry's charity home, the place for film people who reach the end without the money to pay for their own care, and one of Universal's biggest stars of the 1940s died in it. Number 4. Bob Denver. Sherwood Schwartz, who created Gilligan's Island, is reported to have made around $90 million from the reruns. Bob Denver, who played the title character, was paid a weekly salary that topped out at $1,500, and under his contract, the payments stopped once an episode had aired twice. 3 seasons, 98 episodes, 6 decades of syndication, and none of it came back to him. He had been famous before the island as the beatnik Maynard G. Krebs on The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis from 1959 to 1963. His wife Dreama wrote about the money later in her memoir. When it ran short, he would book personal appearances at fairs and conventions and sign photographs until the bills were covered. Their son Colin was born in 1984 with severe autism and a seizure disorder, and he needed round-the-clock specialized care that cost more than they had. Dreama described the two of them living hand-to-mouth for much of the marriage. They left California for Princeton, West Virginia, where he ran a small radio show and set up a foundation for people with special needs. He died on September 2, 2005, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at 70, from complications following throat cancer surgery. Almost every American knew his character's name, and he spent his working life signing autographs to make up the difference. Number 5. Nell Carter. How does a woman with a Tony Award, an Emmy nomination, and 6 seasons of a hit NBC sitcom die with about $200 to her name? She was born Nell Ruth Hardy in Birmingham, Alabama, in 1948, one of 9 children. Her father was killed stepping on a live power line when she was 2 years old. She was raped at gunpoint at 16 and became pregnant. Everything she got after that, she got by singing. In 1978, she won the Tony for Ain't Misbehavin'. 3 years later, she was Nell Harper on Gimme a Break, the housekeeper raising a police chief's 3 daughters, with a young Joey Lawrence added in the 3rd season. She sang the theme song herself. The show ran from 1981 to 1987 and brought her Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. It also ran alongside a suicide attempt in the early 80s, a cocaine detox around 1985, surgery for 2 brain aneurysms in 1992, and worsening diabetes. She kept working through all of it, on Hangin' with Mr. Cooper, as Miss Hannigan in a Broadway revival of Annie, and on Ally McBeal. She declared bankruptcy in 1995, and again in 2002, the second filing coming just months before the end. On January 23, 2003, She collapsed at her home in Beverly Hills. Her son Joshua found her. Her will forbade an autopsy, so Los Angeles County ruled the cause probable arteriosclerotic heart disease with diabetes as a contributing condition. She was 54, and she was in rehearsals for a new stage role when it happened. Reports at the time put roughly $200 in her accounts, against millions in debt. Number 6. Pat Morita. At the 1985 Academy Awards, he became the first Asian American ever nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and almost nobody sitting in that room that night knew he had spent his childhood immobilized in a body cast and then locked in an internment camp. He was born in 1932 to Japanese immigrant farm workers in California, spent years hospitalized with spinal tuberculosis, and was escorted from the hospital to a camp in Arizona during the war by an FBI agent. He worked in computers at Aerojet General before quitting at 30 to do stand-up comedy. From 1975 to 1983, he was Arnold, the diner owner on Happy Days. He left the show in 1976 to headline Mr. T and Tina, the first American sitcom built around an Asian American lead, and the network canceled it within months. 8 years later, he was Mr. Miyagi. Then the parts got smaller and the drinking got worse. He spent the 1990s in direct-to-video work and voice roles, entered rehab in 2004, and died on November 24, 2005, in Las Vegas at 73. His family gave conflicting accounts of the cause. His daughter said heart failure, his manager said kidney failure, while he waited for a transplant. A generation grew up on a character he played who taught patience and dignity, and the man himself spent his last years mostly out of work. Number 7. Jackie Coogan. In 1938, a 23-year-old man walked into a Los Angeles courtroom and sued his own mother and stepfather for the money he had earned as a child. He lost most of it. The fortune was already spent. He walked away with roughly $126,000, and the case became famous for what his mother reportedly argued, that everything a child earned before turning 21 belonged to the parents. His wife at the time, Betty Grable, stood with him through it. 17 years earlier, he had been the most famous child on the planet. Charlie Chaplin spotted him in a vaudeville theater and cast him in The Kid in 1921, when he was 6 years old. The film was one of the biggest of the decade, and it turned him into an industry. There were Coogan hats, Coogan dolls, Coogan peanut butter. Estimates of what he earned as a child performer run from $3 to $4 million, an extraordinary sum for the 1920s. His father was killed in a car crash in 1935 that Jackie survived. His mother remarried the family's business manager, Arthur Bernstein, and by the time Coogan reached adulthood, the accounts were nearly empty. The one thing the lawsuit produced was a law. California passed the Child Actors Bill in 1939, and it is still called the Coogan Act. Every child working in American entertainment today has a protected trust account because his was not protected. He served as a glider pilot in Burma during the war, then came home to decades of small parts. In 1964, he found a second life as Uncle Fester on The Addams Family, bald and unrecognizable as the boy from The Kid. He died on March 1, 1984, in Santa Monica, at 69. His name survives in American law rather than in American film, and it is there because the money was taken. Number 8. Valerie Harper. She had 4 Emmy Awards and a Golden Globe on her shelf, and in 2019, her husband was on the internet asking strangers to help pay for her nursing care. Both of those things were true at exactly the same time, and neither canceled the other out. She started out as a dancer at Radio City Music Hall in New York, and in 1970, she created Rhoda Morgenstern on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, the sharp, insecure neighbor from the Bronx. The character was popular enough to get her own series in 1974, and the wedding episode of Rhoda drew more than 50 million viewers, one of the largest television audiences of the decade. In 1987, she was fired from her own sitcom in a contract dispute. The producers killed the character off, renamed the show, and kept going without her. She sued for breach of contract, and she won. The victory did not bring the career back. She was diagnosed with lung cancer in 2009. In January of 2013, doctors found leptomeningeal carcinomatosis, cancer in the lining of the brain, and gave her as little as 3 months to live. She lived 6 more years. 6 years of treatment costs, and her husband, Tony Cacciodi, refused to move her into a facility, so he started a fundraiser and said plainly that they could not afford the round-the-clock care she needed. She died on August 30th, 2019, at 80. She spent her last years being kept alive by donations from people who had grown up watching her, which is a strange way to be paid for 40 years of work. Number 9. Phil Silvers. Picture the man who played television's greatest schemer standing at a Las Vegas table, losing his own money to the house, night after night, for years. That was not a bit. Silvers was a compulsive gambler, and the casinos took a great deal of what he ever made. He came out of Brooklyn and burlesque, and as Sergeant Ernie Bilko on The Phil Silvers Show from 1955 to 1959, he won 3 Emmy Awards and defined the American television con man. The show was built around a motor pool sergeant at a small fictional army base who ran card games, rigged raffles, and schemed his commanding officer out of every dollar he had. He won a Tony in 1952 for Top Banana, and another in 1972 for A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. That second run ended early when he suffered a stroke that damaged his speech and his stamina. After that, the work was small parts and guest spots. He wrote a memoir about the gambling, and the money never recovered. He died on November 1st, 1985, at 74, found in his sleep at his home in Century City. He built the funniest schemer in television history and lost his own fortune to a game with no punchline. Number 10. Dick York. In the last months of his life, he lay in a bed in Rockford, Michigan, hooked to an oxygen line, working a telephone. He was calling businesses and strangers, asking them to donate blankets and food for homeless people, running a campaign he named Acting for Life, from a mattress he could not get out of. He had advanced emphysema. He had almost no money and no work. He was 63 years old, and 20 years earlier, tens of millions of Americans had watched him every single week. He was Darren Stevens on Bewitched, opposite Elizabeth Montgomery, from 1964 to 1969. Before that, he had been a serious actor, a child radio performer in Chicago, and a featured player in the 1960 film Inherit the Wind, opposite Spencer Tracy. Bewitched was one of the most watched programs in the country, and it made him one of the most familiar faces on American television. The damage had been done years earlier. In 1959, filming They Came to Cordura, he tore the muscles in his back during a scene that required him to haul a railroad handcar. The injury never healed. He was in constant pain. He was prescribed opioid painkillers, and the dependency grew all the way through the 60s while he kept working. In 1969, he collapsed on the Bewitched set and left the series. Dick Sargent replaced him. The offers stopped. He sold what the family had, and with a wife and 5 children, there were years when there was nothing coming in at all. He got clean eventually, but his lungs were already finished by decades of heavy smoking. He died on February 20th, 1992. The man who spent 5 years playing a comfortable suburban husband spent his last years broke, on oxygen, raising money for people who had nothing, because he understood exactly what that was like. Number 11. David Cassidy. How does a man who sold out arenas at 21 end up losing his house at 65? He was born in 1950, the son of the actor Jack Cassidy, and when he was cast as Keith Partridge on The Partridge Family in 1970, his own stepmother, Shirley Jones, was cast as his mother. For about 3 years after that, he was the biggest teen idol in the world, and then it was over. I Think I Love You sold millions of copies. His face was on lunchboxes, magazines, bedsheets, and posters in bedrooms across 2 continents. He was paid a television salary while the merchandising made a fortune he had almost no share of, and he spent years in litigation trying to recover a portion of it. He walked away from the whole thing at 24, after a 14-year-old girl was crushed and killed in the crowd at one of his concerts in London in 1974. The last decade was public and grim. Arrests for driving under the influence in 2010, 2013, and 2014, a bankruptcy filing in 2015. His Florida home went into foreclosure. In February of 2017, he announced he had dementia, the same illness that had taken his mother. He died on November 21, 2017, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at 67, of liver failure. His daughter Katie said that his final words were, "So much wasted time." He was one of the most photographed young men of the 1970s, and he died with almost nothing left of what that had earned. Number 12. Dawn Wells. In 2018, a fundraising page appeared online for a 79-year-old woman in Los Angeles who could not pay her medical bills. The page explained that she had spent 2 months in the hospital, that her savings were gone, and that she was facing the end of her life without the money to get through it. Strangers gave her nearly $200,000. The woman was Mary Ann from Gilligan's Island. Dawn Wells was crowned Miss Nevada in 1959 and competed at Miss America the following year. In 1964, she was cast as Mary Ann Summers, the farm girl from Kansas in the gingham dress, and across 98 episodes, she became one of the most recognizable women on American television. The cast was paid a modest weekly salary and received no meaningful residuals from the endless syndication that followed, the same arrangement that left Bob Denver signing autographs at county fairs to cover his own bills. 6 decades of reruns generated an enormous amount of money, and almost none of it reached the 7 people on that raft. She worked constantly afterward. Guest roles, dinner theater, a cookbook, and an acting workshop she ran in Idaho for years. The 2008 financial crash took a large part of what she had saved, and a run of medical costs took the rest. By her late 70s, she was a famous face with a stack of unpaid bills, and the only reason those bills got paid was that the people who had watched her as children sent her money directly. She died on December 30th, 2020, in Los Angeles, at 82, of complications from COVID-19. The reruns did not stop for a single day. That is the whole arithmetic of this business, and it is worth saying plainly. The image outlives the person, the image keeps earning, and the person does not see it. Every name on this list was famous right up until the moment being famous had to pay for something, and then they were on their own, and the audience turned out to be the only ones still paying attention.